Welcome to Ukraina-podden, a podcast from Nettavisen. My name is Tormod Malvinsæter and I'm the host for today. With me in the studio today I have my good friends.
Jørgensen Henriksen, a Ukraine columnist at Nettavisen and the leader of the Norwegian-Ukrainian Friendship Association.
Warm welcome to you, Peter Frølich, Member of Parliament for the Conservative Party in Norway and President and founder for Fritt Ukraina, a Norwegian NGO supporting Ukraine. And a warm welcome to Adam Kinzinger, former congressman from the great state of Illinois and Lieutenant Colonel of the US Air Force and member of the January 6th Commission. Welcome to us.
Hey, great. It's good to be with you guys. Thanks.
It's an honor to have you here. And I think we'll just jump straight to it because everyone following the war in Ukraine closely, they also pay a lot of attention to the election coming up in the US next week. And what kind of America do we risk getting if Mr. Trump is again elected president, Mr. Kinzinger?
Yeah, I mean, look, it's a real concern. And the good news is, I think in the last few weeks, it's looked more and more like he's not going to win. But, you know, I'm a Republican, and what Trump represents is not the party I remember. In fact, it's the direct opposite. So I think the risk is if Donald Trump wins, certainly Ukraine is probably going to be hung out to dry, or at least they're going to force some compromise on Ukraine that, frankly, Ukraine should not accept. And I think there will be a continuing downplaying of the importance of NATO. And the crazy thing about it is in the last few years, we've seen firsthand why NATO is so important and how NATO can actually work to push off future wars. But this is a guy that just truly doesn't understand foreign policy and has some weird thing for Vladimir Putin. So I think it could be dangerous.
I think this is something that concerns a lot of Norwegians, and with your election so close now, we debate it over the coffee machine and everywhere, really. And I have a lot of discussions with friends and colleagues regarding this, and I'm often portrayed as the doom guy, and they say, well, I don't think it could get that bad, but you've, as a Republican congressman and in the January 6th Commission and with the statements that we've heard from General Kelly and others lately, could you give us a picture? How worried should we be? A small NATO country with a border to Russia, if Trump is elected, is it the right assumption that it probably won't be that bad?
Yeah, no, look, I think, I mean, the good thing about our system of government is even when Trump is president, if he wins again, there is still power in the legislature. There's still power in the Senate. And basically, typical American politics is whoever wins the presidency, the kind of undercurrent of political future is always against them. So we always swing kind of back and forth. And so I don't think like all hope is lost if Trump wins. But I do think it's quite dangerous. I mean, look, this morning I wake up to find out that he has basically threatened to execute Liz Cheney, who was my partner on the January 6th committee. You know, he has continually said that there is election fraud, even leading up to this election, which we know there isn't. So the risk you have is instability in the United States. But certainly, again, if he wins, you know, the question is, what is our commitment to NATO at that point? Now, the good news is, if you still take every other European country minus the United States and put their ability, maybe not where they're at now, but their ability, if they actually commit to creating a military economy or a war economy, they could still crush NATO. And so that's the good news. But obviously having the United States is an integral part of that. And that's why I think if Donald Trump does win, there will be serious pushback in the United States against abandoning Ukraine. There are still a number of Republicans that support Ukraine, by the way. But that doesn't mean that it's going to be an easy road, and it's going to be tough. And I don't think we're doing anybody any favors to pretend like Donald Trump will somehow see the light, because we know who he is. He's been president already.
Mm. Mr. Kinzinger, thank you very much, first of all, for your service in the past and everything you have done and continue to do to stand up for basic democratic values. It's great to see that there are still voices like yours in America and in American politics that can stand up for what is right. As a conservative myself, I find it baffling to see that the old party of Lincoln, of Reagan, of John McCain, for that matter, have so obviously been influenced by Russian propaganda and disinformation. How did this happen?
Look, and by the way, as a fellow conservative, you and I probably are generally, by our own country standards, the same kind of person. We believe in a strong national defense. We believe in pushing back against autocracy, and we probably want a little smaller of a government that allows people to just live their free lives, right? And so how did we get to this point? I can talk about, I was in Congress for 12 years. I can see how that progressed over 12 years. But really, if I had to boil it down to one thing, and there's a number of things, but if I had to boil it down to one thing, it would be simply, we have used fear. We have turned ourselves against each other. The left is now fighting the right. We're not just two sides of the same pro-American coin. Now there's like a war. It's a culture war. And this is the warning I would give to every European country. Do not get sucked into the culture war fight, because there is nothing, frankly, that is less important, but that drives emotions so hard. And so we get sucked into this culture war, and then Vladimir Putin pretends to be, it's a false front, but he pretends to be this defender of Western Christianity, this defender of traditional values, which he's the opposite of. He certainly isn't. But I think part of that is why, in convincing people that he is some defender of Western values, is why that certain people on the Republican side like him, because he ticks off the Democrats, as he should tick off the Democrats. He should actually anger the Republicans too. I think that's part of it. And then there is no doubt there has been real, paid, actual Russian propaganda in the United States of America that unfortunately has seemed to be somewhat successful. Now, people are waking up to that, and I think, God, I hope when Donald Trump loses in a few days, it'll be a really big blow to Russia. But we in the West, I believe, have got to start playing the same kind of offensive games against the Russians that they play against us. It is the only way that we will dissuade them or push them back from doing this into the future.
Yeah, you're going directly into my next question, because as Peter said, I think you're a very important voice of defending small d democracy around the world, and you've commented on the situation in Georgia lately. But we see this culture war thing, and it clearly works in the US, but we've seen it work in Ukraine, it works in Georgia, it works in Moldova. It almost pushed the EU election in Georgia over the brink. We see it work in France with Le Pen, and in Great Britain with Brexit. What can we do because it's something that, it's a weapon that they use in bad will. It's not an actual thing that stems from the population. It's a weapon against democracy. What can we do to counteract that?
Yeah, it's an invented weapon. And you look at like Hungary. Why is it that Orban is able to hold on to power despite a bad economy? Well, because he makes you think that everybody else against him is, part of this cabal of deep state or evil, right? So I think it's a couple things. First off, I think we have to recognize that the left, at least I can speak in the United States, the left went too far on some things. When you get into this idea that there are, limitless genders and not male or female, right? Or you can just be whatever. I think some of that went too far in the United States, and there was a understandable backlash. This is why each country needs a progressive and a conservative movement. The progressives pull the country forward when it's not necessarily ready. The conservatives hold them back when it's like, okay, we're going a little too fast. So I think we have to recognize that there is real grievance among some on the right. And the problem is, instead of addressing that, we've let these extreme voices come in and turn that fear into anger. So I think we need to be aware of that. I think the left has to take some ownership for kind of how far and how hard it's pushed, and that it's created this backlash. And then we need, and this is what we're lacking in the United States, and this is why I'm glad that we have Peter there, we need conservative leaders to be the voice of reason. Part of the reason the Republican Party got hijacked over 10 years is because, with few exceptions, me, Liz Cheney, and a few others, every other Republican congressman just kind of went quiet. And they're like, oh, it's not up to me to push back against Donald Trump or push back against this illiberalism. Well, yeah, it really is. You're a leader. If you want to be a leader, you have to lead. In Congress, we represent 800,000 people. That's 800,000 people looking up to you for direction. And so I am so happy to see conservative leaders, frankly, around the world, and the few that still exist in the US, that are pushing back against this narrative, because that is essential. And I will say this to people on the left. Don't just turn against a conservative leader in your country because they're conservative. I mean, you can oppose their politics. That's fine. That's democracy. But we need this awkward alliance, what I've called an awkward alliance between the sane right, the center, and the left to defend democracies, not just in the United States, but around the globe, because all democracy, all self-governance is under threat right now.
Good points. I just have a question about what we can expect from a Harris administration. In case everything goes as we hope, I gotta say, on Tuesday, will there be a policy change towards Ukraine, or do you expect more of the same?
It's a great question, and look, I'm a Republican hoping for Harris too, so you're in good company, and there's actually quite a few of us. I think, look, the bad news is if Harris wins, it's not. I think, well, the good news. I'll say the good news is it's not going to be any worse than Joe Biden. Okay, so Biden has done better than Donald Trump would have done. He obviously says the right things. We've been pretty generous in weaponry. He's done a good job of bringing Europe together to continue to support Ukraine as well. But, there's insanity, like the restrictions on the use of long-range weapons. That's insane. As a military guy, I know that the only way to win a war is if you're allowed to target stuff that's creating war in the aggressor's country, period. And by the way, all a country needs to do to defend itself is continue defending itself. That's it, until the aggressor gets worn out. Well, you wear the aggressor out by attacking in Ukraine. So the good news is she's certainly not going to be any worse than Joe Biden, and certainly way better than Donald Trump. My concern is that there will be a continuation of kind of the current American posture. But I also have heard some good information that, by the way, I talked to Harris. I talked to her about a week ago about Ukraine. And I will tell you, unlike most people when I talk to about Ukraine, that are in politics, they give the right answer and you can tell they know what they're supposed to say. She genuinely, and I can see this in her eyes, I'm pretty good at reading people. She genuinely cares about Ukraine. And so my hope is that she will be able to push back against the Department of Defense in saying, no, we need long-range strike capability in Ukraine. And if she wins, I hope to play some version of a role in pushing them that way. But so the very short answer is no worse than Joe Biden, hopefully a little bit better in terms of some of those permissions. The difficulty will be getting a further aid package through Congress, but it looks like pretty likely that the Democrats are going to win the House and that the Republicans will win the Senate, but there's enough Republican senators that would support continuing to support Ukraine that I don't think Congress is a lost cause by any means.
It's extremely interesting discussing how the Harris administration might differ from the Biden administration. On the train ride into the studio today, we passed the USS Harry S. Truman that is visiting Oslo today. It's coming into port right now. And that's a very important projection of power. It's important for us. We need the US to have a deterrence against Russia. But at the same time, I know that people are worried if knock on wood, we are in a conflict with Russia in the future. Would there be a US administration that denies us flying F-35s into Russia? So would you say, because I read the Biden administration and Joe Biden as quite risk averse, and I don't think that that has something to do with the right or the left. I think maybe Hillary Clinton would have been less risk averse. How do you read Harris as a person? She's taken some risks in her political career. Could she be more willing to take risk when it comes to the relationship with Russia?
I think so. And you know, look, with Joe Biden, I think part of the risk aversion, I mean, he's actually in his whole career, he's always been risk averse. I mean, you even look at how we left Afghanistan, which I still am very bitter about as an Afghanistan veteran. You can disagree with us being there, but like we should not have left it the way we did. But, you know, look, Joe Biden's foreign policy instincts are right, but his risk aversion is very high. And I think some of that has to do with an impending election. And keep in mind, Donald Trump and the right, they're in this like 1930s mode of saying that everything is going to lead to World War III. And oh God, we must appease the aggressor or else World War III, even though all of us listening to this understand that it's appeasing the aggressors that actually leads to World War III. I think Harris is much less risk averse than Joe Biden. Let's keep in mind, she's actually not been on the national scene that long. So her kind of foreign policy chops have come post-Cold War. Joe Biden really was kind of a Cold Warrior where it was all about de-escalation. It's all about, yes, but you know, Soviet Union and the US can destroy each other. We need to continually de-escalate so that we don't do that. Well, it's a different world now. And Vladimir Putin is a different leader. And frankly, the only time Vladimir Putin ever backs down is when he meets a brick wall. And so I do think she'll be a little more risk prone, actually prone's the wrong word, but willing to take risk than Joe Biden was. And I want to say this to our European friends. Like, I get that there's questions about Ukraine and kind of, you know, and I still think America is very strongly with Ukraine. I really do. I just disagree with some of the lack of permissions. But I have zero doubt in my mind, zero, that if Norway, for instance, and Russia ended up in a shooting war, I have zero doubt that the United States we would put the entire force of our military behind destroying Russia. I believe that with all of my heart. And so I don't think our commitment to Article 5 and NATO by any means is soft. I think, frankly, even if Donald Trump wins, it won't be soft. But I just think right now there's a lack of understanding of the importance of Ukraine. And there's a lack of understanding of the importance of Georgia. What an important area for us that it feels like the United States has kind of walked away from, even though we really haven't, but I think should have more attention.
And you kind of talked about it there, but how damaging do you think the kind of lack of trust the rest of the world now might have towards the United States because of the delayed package to Ukraine in the Congress and their kind of hesitance to be the world's leader and defend democracy, because it might affect your weapon industry, which is important for a lot of US jobs, and your position as the greatest power in the world.
Yeah, look, it's a real concern of mine, which is, you know, look, the United States kind of earned this position over decades, right? Of understanding that we had an important role in the world, of getting involved in World War I and particularly World War II and helping to shape the post-World War II world. This would be the biggest self-own for us to walk away from this. I mean, the United States is not an empire. Some people say we're an empire. We're not. Empires seek to own and control land for the sole purpose of that. We project power for, you know, you don't have to always agree with the reasons, but generally pretty good reasons. And so this exhaustion, and here's the crazy thing, if I can just say it, this exhaustion that some people in the United States think they feel this like war weariness, they have no idea what war weariness is. They have no idea. Yes, we lost 3,000 or 4,000 people in Afghanistan, and it's terrible. The Russians lose that every 2 days in Ukraine. Basically you're tired of seeing it on TV is about what it comes down to. And the problem is really in the last 10 or 15 years, we haven't had a president that has ever stood in front of the American people and made the case for world leadership. And despite the fact that nobody's made the case for world leadership, the vast majority of Americans still believe that we have an important role to play in the world. So I don't think America is a lost cause by any means. And we all go through these fluctuations, right? America's in, America's out. We hate America, we love America. But I think that's natural. But the message I would give to my European friends is, look, I think we're going to be here with you. But pretend like we're not, because it is time. Like Europe and Norway's done a great job of this, by the way. And I know your company Nammo very well. It's pretty cool. But invest in your military. Particularly, I say this to my German friends. I get you have a 3% deficit rule, but this is a different world. Invest in your military. Pretend like we're not going to be there. I think we're going to be there. But I will tell you, the more that Americans feel like certain European countries are kind of like, oh, America's always going to be here, we can invest in social services and force them to invest in the military. Well, that does create a lot of anger. But it's been amazing to me, and I'll end that part on a good news, which is Europe really has stepped up in the last couple of years. So while we can still be a little critical, there has been a massive increase in production of arms and generosity to Ukraine, for instance. So I think, look, we are a super partnership that I think is extremely important, and we need some of our European allies to step up like others have.
I know you're in a tight schedule, but you have time for one last question before we let you go?
Of course, yeah.
So you mentioned that you and Peter probably have a lot in common, given your conservatives, members of parliament, so to speak. And I think it's interesting because you were just a regular member of Congress, but you became known throughout the world, here on the other side of the world, after the full-scale invasion, because you were so clearly, not one of those people that just gave the right answer. You very clearly stated how important this was. So I commend you for that. And you might have another thing in common. I think I'm a political analyst, so I think that it's a good chance that Peter here will be the next Secretary of Defense in Norway. So if you're offered a cabinet position in the Harris administration, for example, Secretary of Defense, would you accept it?
Yeah, I mean, look, absolutely, I'd be an idiot not to, right? Like those are discussions that aren't really had until, we don't like to count our chickens before they hatch, so to speak. But absolutely, look, and I believe in her foreign policy. There's probably things that I don't agree with, but I think the Democratic Party in the United States has basically taken the role of the old Republican Party. So I would in a heartbeat. And if it's an area of defense, it would be great to work with Peter. I hope you get that position, because that would be fantastic. And I think, the two of us and plus any other counterpart can do a lot to building a world that is safe. None of us want to be in war, none of us. But if we go to war, we have to be the most lethal, powerful fighting force in the world and inflict the most damage and pain on our enemy in the shortest amount of time possible. That's how you save the most lives. And I would in a heartbeat, for sure.
A final military question, because you have a very distinguished military career, Lieutenant Colonel in the Air Force. Are you still a reservist?
Yep. I'll be retiring very soon.
Yeah, because your military career is coming to an end. And does it fill you with sadness that you never got to serve in the Navy?
No, not at all. In fact, I love being out of Congress now, but I love even more that I never had to put myself on a tin can with a bunch of dudes for 6 months at a time. So I'm happy with what I chose.
So at the Harry S. Truman that I'm going to debate your answer with.
Sounds great.
Mr. Kinzinger, it was an honor having you on the show. Please take care, stay safe, and good luck the next couple of days before the election.
You bet. I'd love to come back, so hopefully we'll get to do this again.
For sure. See you soon, and thank you so much.
Bye-bye. Take care.
Even though Adam left us, we'll continue this show in Norwegian. So to our international listeners,
it's a great chance to learn Norwegian.
Yeah. It's a great chance to learn Norwegian, or you can pay for the new AI stuff to direct translate. Men nå vi over på norsk. Veldig stas at vi fikk Adam Kinzinger med på denne podcasten her. Hvis dere lurer på hvordan vi fikk det til, så det Jørn som skal ha all ære for det. Hva slags inntrykk sitter dere igjen med etter å ha pratet med Adam? Har dere mer tro på fremtiden nå enn dere hadde for en halvtime siden?
Ja, litt. Det vil jeg si. Altså, han en veldig imponerende fyr, så det jo litt sånn starstruck av å snakke med noen som har en så sterk ryggrad og moralsk karakter som han har. Men han optimistisk på vegne av Harris, og det jo på en måte jobben hans. Han driver jo aktiv valgkamp for henne, så det jo ikke overraskende. Men jeg synes det interessant at han så tydelig på at han tror at hun mer risikovillig enn Joe Biden. Og alternativet orker jeg ikke å tenke på, for det kan være så katastrofalt. Men hvis hun faktisk klarer å vinne, så kan det være gode nyheter for Ukraina.
Ja, føles det litt lettere å sitte på Stortinget nå, Peter, etter å ha fått litt... Han jo en støttespiller for Harris, og vil jo snakke frem henne, det må han gjøre. Han kan ikke si at han tror Trump vinner. Men hva tenker du etter å ha hørt på deg?
Altså, som en som konservativ, i alle fall etter norske... kan du si norsk målestokk.
Kommunist i USA.
Ja. I don't care what kind of communist you are. Nei, det klart det veldig befriende å høre denne siden av det republikanske partiet, at det fortsatt finnes. De bare forsvinnende lite mindretall, dessverre. Det som har vært min sorg gjennom de siste årene, å se hvor få som våget å ta steget frem og påtale, kan du si, det som tidligere på i denne podcasten har kalt de fascistoide kreftene i det republikanske partiet, som åpenbare, og som ikke blitt satt ordentlig på plass. Det klart det demokratiske partiet har også hatt sine utfordringer, og de har en ytre venstrefløy som helt sinnssyke, bare for å si det rett ut. De på en måte ganske tydelig satt på plass av det demokratiske etablissementet. Ingenting tilsvarende har skjedd med de ytterliggående kreftene i det republikanske partiet. Tvert imot det de som har vunnet frem. Og det plutselig blitt stuerent å holde på med den vanvittige både retorikken og Russland-vennlige dreiningen som det partiet har tatt. Så det jo helt befriende å snakke med Kinzinger. Jeg håper jo han blir, kan du si, i den tverrpolitiske spiriten, at han kan bli en republikansk statsråd i en Harris-administrasjon. Sjansene for det vel kanskje ikke helt voldsomme, men Obama gjorde vel noe lignende, gjorde han ikke det?
Jo da, Obama og Bill Clinton hadde også William Cohen som tidligere republikansk senator som Secretary of Defense. Så jeg tenker, altså, hun har sagt hun skal ha republikanere i kabinettet. Det kan jo være sånne som Jeff Flake, som ambassadør nå, og sånn her, men altså, Kinzinger en stjerne på den rasjonelle høyresiden i USA. Jeg tenker, det ikke dumt for henne å fremheve noen med en politisk karriere foran seg, som kanskje kan bidra til å bygge opp et republikansk parti etter Trump, om hun skulle vinne. Så jeg tenker, det sikkert mange gode kandidater, men jeg tror at han en frontrunner til å bli Secretary of Defense.
Kamala Harris advisors, if you still listen, you should translate what Jørn just said there. Vi må også snakke litt om fronten i Ukraina før vi må videre. Det går skikkelig, kan si at det går skikkelig dårlig for Ukraina, spesielt i Donetsk. Det kom en ukrainsk var general Loberst, husker jeg ikke helt, forrige uke, som sa til et tysk magasin at nå har fronten vår i Donbass rakna. Hvor alvorlig situasjonen nede i Ukraina nå, og spesielt da en fokus på Donbass og denne angrepet nordover fra Vuhledar og sørover fra Pokrovsk. Det der det står dårligst til.
Det står veldig dårlig til, og det jo fordi at nå vi i en fase, som jeg også sa i høringen vi hadde på Stortinget nylig, at nå det ordentlig utmattelseskrig. Og som Adam Kinzinger sa når vi snakket med han, at den forsvarende part, for å vinne krigen, så må de bare slite ut de som angrep. Altså det de som holder ut lengst som kommer til å vinne denne krigen. Og vi kommer til å se fryktelige ting på fronten, frontavsnitt som rakner og sånn. For nå vi på det stadiet av krigen at begge sidene helt ekstremt utslitt. Og så det hvem holder ut lengst. Og der kan Norge spille en rolle. Jeg vil all ære til deg, Peter. Du har stilt spørsmål til statsministeren og har vært tydelig i dette spørsmålet. Vi ser litt bevegelse i norsk politikk nå. Altså, fronten i Ukraina nå sånn at de mangler alt. Og det som skal til for å endre det ressurser. Det ikke, altså, general Sersky har de ressursene han har. Det kommer ikke til å være noen store gjennombrudd. Det er ikke noen taktikk eller noe sånt som kommer til å endre det her. Det er ressurser. Og der må Norge stille opp.
Er det en ting Ukraina mangler nå, så er det jo rett og slett kapital. Det er penger. Og jeg synes det var veldig gledelig. Jeg mener jo regjeringen må jo roses der de fortjener ros. De har selvfølgelig etter litt push, men likevel endt opp med å si ja til å bruke norsk kapital til direkte investering i ukrainsk våpenindustri. Det at vi følger danskenes veldig gode eksempel og følger opp det tror jeg glimrende. Ja. Danskene har jo vist hva som er mulig å gjøre. De brukte vel, for å ta et eksempel, de brukte 2 måneder på å produsere 18 store Bogdana selvdrevne artillerikanoner. Og jeg tror det finnes hundrevis av ulike militære kjøretøy og våpen og droner og den type ting som går an å produsere, så lenge vi bare tilfører den ene tingen Norge har mer enn noe annet land, nemlig kapital.
Det er rett og slett norske kroner, og det er det Alexander Kamyshin, vår felles venn, også dere som hører på, tidligere minister for forsvarsindustrien og nå rådgiver for Zelensky, har sagt til Nettavisen tidligere. Det beste Vesten kan gjøre for å støtte Ukraina er å gi dem penger så de kan produsere våpen selv uten som det går kjapt, det er billigere, og det finnes ikke restriksjoner på disse våpnene.
Ja. Et godt eksempel på det er jo langtrekkende missiler, som de utvikler selv, men det koster veldig mye både å utvikle og få opp serieproduksjon på det. Og det vil jo unngå hele problemet med ATACMS og restriksjonene der når det er hjemmelaget.
Ja. Siste nyheten før vi gikk i studio nå var klokka snart 4:15, var at regjeringen inviterer de parlamentariske lederne på Stortinget til å snakke om støtten til Ukraina utenfor de normale budsjettbehandlingene. Det høres jo bra ut, men hva betyr egentlig det? Altså, hva har det å si for Ukraina, Petter? Du som faktisk sitter på Stortinget.
Sitter i det, ja. Nei, altså, det har jo vært lenge en enighet om dette Nansen-programmet, som i begynnelsen i alle fall var veldig viktig. Altså signalisere langsiktighet, og at vi var tverrpolitisk fra Rødt til FrP. Alle sto samlet om støtten til Ukraina. Etter hvert så har nok utviklet seg en oppfatning om at den enigheten kan fort bli litt begrensende, bli litt klam nesten. Fordi at det å kritisere regjeringen for somling eller manglende nivå på støtten blir liksom nesten fremstilt som et brudd på denne Nansen-enigheten. Og da blir det mer en diskusjon om liksom, Nansen-pakken og verdien av en enighet i seg selv versus realiteten i saken. Så nå er den borgerfreden på en måte brutt. Det tror jeg er litt sunt for debatten. Da må partier ut og signalisere klart og tydelig. Vi vil ha mer, men de kan ikke bare slippe unna med å si det. De må også si hvilken sum tenker dere. Det er jo regjeringens invitasjon til Stortinget. Ja, kom med deres alternative budsjetter, begynne å diskutere summer, og så kan vi sette oss ned og ta det som en parallell prosess ved siden av statsbudsjettet. Jeg tror det kan ende opp på et bra sted, at Ukraina får mer støtte raskere. Det var jo ikke bra det som ble lagt frem fra regjeringen, hvor de gikk ned fra rundt 30 milliarder i år til 15 milliarder. Det er ikke en riktig måte å budsjettere på. Og det er en måte å dråpe drip feed, altså rett og slett bare å fôre liksom, i små biter til Ukraina, i stedet for å gi alt det som trengs fra og med 1.1.2025 i budsjettåret. Hvis regjeringen også har reelle planer om å bevilge 30 milliarder pluss for neste år, ja, så gjør det. Vis det. Ta det fra første stund. Ikke hold på med sånn, kan vi si, holde tilbake igjen for å fôre ut litt i revidert nasjonalbudsjett og litt i nysaldering neste år og så videre.
Og det er Venstre og MDG som har gått foran og vært de partiene som har vært ivrigst på å kritisere regjeringen for manglende støtte, eller for lav støtte til Ukraina. Men nå, siste ukene, så har det begynt å bevege seg litt grann i Høyre også. Dere er ikke helt på MDG og Venstre-nivå ennå, Petter?
Jeg tror jeg kan si såpass at om det er stille fra Høyre i media, og det er en del som kommer og sier hvorfor er Høyre så stille og sånn. Jeg tror det handler litt om stil og fremgangsmåte. Og at jeg tror bare jeg må forsikre folk om at selv om man ikke leser om Høyres krav og posisjoner hver eneste bit i dag i avisen, så jobbes det likevel kontinuerlig med dette. Og man jobber kanskje på en måte som er mer resultatorientert Altså, går det an å ta en telefon til noen høyt oppe i regjeringen og fortelle dem hva som bør gjøres, i stedet for å gå ut og kreve det i media? Hvis det er større sjanse for at det faktisk fører til endring, så er det typisk en ting som Høyre kan gjøre. Så jeg lever for så vidt godt med kritikk om at Høyre ikke er synlig nok, men det gjøres masse for å fremme en ukrainske sak, også fra Høyres side.
Men jeg tror det er enormt viktig det her med å løfte ut av de vanlige budsjettprosessene. Jeg har kritisert regjeringen mye, og skal skryte av de når de trenger skryt. Det er veldig bra initiativ av Venstre, veldig bra at Høyre støtter det initiativet, og hvis regjeringen nå går med på å løfte ut av de vanlige budsjettprosessene, så er det veldig positivt. For at om det blir 15 eller 30 milliarder i løpet av 2025, så er det alt for lite begge to. Altså vi trenger en vesentlig større støtte til Ukraina. Kristin Clemet sa 300 milliarder nå, og det er noe som vil ha påvirket krigen. Jeg skjønner at det er et veldig stort tall sett i forhold til debattene vi har nå, men det er et rasjonelt tall. Og det er nettopp det som trengs nå, at vi tar debatten ut ifra alle de andre politiske debattene og det vanlige budsjettdebatten, og ikke har det med i de vanlige budsjettforhandlingene og forventer at SV skal løfte Ukraina opp mot skole og sånne ting. Vi må ta det ut av den andre saksbehandlingen og ha en fokusert, sentrert debatt rundt hva er rasjonelt for Norge og Norges sikkerhet i vår relasjon til Ukraina.
Ja, Petter?
Jeg vil bare presisere også at selv om jeg sier, jeg synes det er veldig flott det initiativet som Venstre har tatt, og jeg synes det er veldig flott at MDG er ute og er tydelige og sånn. Så jeg vil bare presisere at jeg rakker ikke ned på de for å liksom løpe ut i media og sånn. Jeg tror alt hjelper. Det at folk er ute i media, jeg har gjort det selv. Jeg stod på Dagsrevyen og sa at vi om nødvendig må bryte handlingsregelen. Om det er det til syvende og sist står og faller på. Altså frihet er viktigere enn handlingsregel. Så jeg synes det er helt fint at man på en måte går ut i media og har utspill. Det er bare det at Høyre kan ikke gjøre det hver dag. Vi kan gjøre det en gang i uken eller 2 ganger i uken. Det er vel omtrent den frekvensen vi har hatt. Men alle finner sin stil. Det viktigste er at jeg tror alle på Stortinget er enige om at man må hjelpe Ukraina, og så er det noen som er litt mer utålmodig. Og det fører til endring. Det er gøy å se at når vi jobber på den måten, så beveger også regjeringen seg. De lytter, det skal de ha kred for. Så det går litt sakte, men vi går i riktig retning.
Vi er dessverre nødt til å runde av. Peter skal rekke et tog. Det er snart helg for Jørn og meg. Vi skal ta med oss at det har vært et stort russisk motangrep i Kursk. Det ser ut til å ha blitt slått tilbake. Vi fikk rapporter inn om det rett før sending. Det skal skje i løpet av det siste døgnet. Det er for så vidt gode nyheter for Ukraina. Russiske telegramkanaler melder også at de har mistet et Su-34 kampfly et sted. For oss så er det uklart om det har skjedd over Ukraina eller helt øst i Russland. Vi vet ikke hvor det har skjedd, men det skal ha styrta. Det er i hvert fall Russland et fly mindre å bruke i krigen mot Ukraina. Med de ordene der så takker vi for at du enten lyttet eller så på. Tusen takk til Petter Frølich, tusen takk til Jørn Sund Henriksen, takk til Adam Kinzinger, og takk til vår superprodusent Adrian Cameron.